Hello, I'm Colleen Gallagher, CEO at OnWrd UpWrd, and you're listening to the Association Insights podcast powered by OnWrd UpWrd, where each week we interview association leaders from across the country to hear how they're trying new things, taking big risks, and delivering value for their members. We'll explore the realities of what it means to work in and with associations and bring you the insights and inspiration you need to advance your career and make big changes at your association. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Association Insights podcast powered by OnWrd UpWrd. I'm your host, Colleen Gallagher. Today I have a guest who's likely a familiar name to many of the association community, and if you haven't heard of him yet, you're in for a treat. I'm joined by Dr. Michael Carr-Tatonetti, CEO and founder of Pricing for Associations. Michael helps associations gain clarity, build sustainable pricing models, and communicate value with confidence. Through their proven framework of data, value, and pricing, they transform pricing from guesswork into a leadership tool. Michael, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yes, thank you for having me, Colleen. I'm happy to be here with you.
Fantastic. Well, I'm excited to hear more, and this is always a hot topic for our association professional listeners here. So for those that might not be familiar with Pricing for Associations, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your background, how you got here, and the work that you do with associations.
So I've always worked in nonprofit for 20 years now and associations for about 10 of those years. And I basically came up through the ranks, worked in education, became a VP at an association. And the one that I worked at was for the pricing profession. So I was working with subject matter experts on pricing and learning a lot, and realized that other associations didn't have this knowledge. I mean, I didn't even know that it existed. And so naturally just started helping colleagues and peers, and it turned into a whole thing. And so I buckled down, earned my certification, learned everything I needed, and brought it over to the association side. So we just work with associations on pricing strategy. Basically, when they're saying what the hell should the price be, that's when we come in. And it's really fun for me because we need money for a mission, and pricing is the quickest lever to increase profit over trying to get new members and, campaigns and all that. That's a long-term strategy, but pricing is kind of a quick, easy, if you know how to do it. So I love sharing about it because usually there's a lot of light bulbs and aha moments whenever I do training or work with clients.
I think that's just such a valuable offering because it is that topic that it's like, what do we do? What should this cost? How do we message that? So I think that's incredible. And I know you've worked with over 100 associations on pricing strategy, which is amazing. I would love to know, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that association leaders have when it comes to both pricing and member value?
Yeah, so I would say probably one to two things that immediately come to mind. One is usually it's that they're at one end of each spectrum. So it's usually one or the other. Either a client is really ambitious and they feel like they're strongly underpricing and there's all this room to go up, but they're sometimes missing the mark on that. Like there's not actually a willingness to pay from the audience. On the flip side, they're afraid to go up, and sometimes they're the ones that have a lot of wiggle room to actually go up. Like they've been holding themselves back psychologically and thinking that it's something that they could implement. So then when it's like, well, hey, it's actually been 5-10 years since a price increase, and you really can go up, and there's a propensity, a willingness from your audience to do more. But the big thing either way that is really important is that it has to be tied to the value that you're delivering. So it's not just math, it's not just a number, it's psychology. It's about, what do I perceive that I'm getting, and is it worth it against that perception? And so marketing psychology matters just as much as finance when it comes to pricing.
And that, what am I getting? That's the ROI we all come back to, right? I mean, that's what associations are all about. It has to make sense for your members.
Absolutely. And a lot of times those things are more qualitative, like they're intangible. They're not, like, it's not, I get 12 monthly newsletters. Like they don't care about that, right? It's community, it's connection, it's belonging. I usually use Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like kind of a rundown of how do they see themselves and how do they fit in. So it's in those things that you find the value, and then you're hitting the right buttons to say, okay, how do we keep that environment going? And what does it take financially to pull that off? And then what's our fair share of that so that we can afford to keep this moving?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And I mean, right now, associations are under pressure, a lot of them. I mean, the whole world is, if you turn on the news for a minute, and then try not to hide under your bed for the rest of the day. But, we've got rising costs, changing member expectations, tighter budgets. How should leaders be thinking differently about pricing in today's environment compared to even just 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think that it's going to depend on the organization. Again, it's kind of like a two-prong based on what I see. I think that there are some organizations that almost need to simplify a bit more. They're trying to do all the things. And the reality is that we're already serving typically such niche audiences, right? Based on profession or trade. And so what we need to offer them, I usually think that there's a lot of things on the table. And also this goes to centralizing decision-making. One thing that I see a lot is there will be, departments that are kind of competing against each other. I've worked with like one medical association, I won't name, but in particular that we've worked with for probably 3-4 years now, where they realize that some of their in-person events, like the one-off, the 1-day, 2-day symposiums, versus then their virtual education department that was running, virtual editions of basically the same thing. They were competing, and it's like the members are confused. Like, well, what do we go to, and what's the difference? So a lot of times there's a lot of pressure to make money, to make revenue for your department, for your function, but we're not taking this like cross-departmental look of, well, what are we doing cohesively? Because they don't see it as education, membership, events. They see it as the association and what's my journey with the association. So I think in some ways, some need to simplify a bit because they're probably overkilling and wasting resources. Others, though, sometimes are not evolving enough and offering enough. And so it's kind of like an accordion. To me, it's there might be seasons or years where you're doing a bit more and then some where you're simplifying back down. And it's kind of this iterative testing and seeing what works. But costs are up. That is a reality. Prices in general should always be going up. And if you're not raising prices every year, if not every other year, even just incremental, you need to start. You've got to train consumers in that behavior so that then when there are bigger changes, it's palatable. But I think assessing that, like kind of where are we at? Are we doing too much? Are we doing too little? Like Goldilocks-ish, we got to get it just right. And that's hard, but it's a constant business scanning that has to happen.
Yeah, it's funny. It hit me when you were saying that everything in our life goes up. Every automatic payment I have, every year, it's, hey, here's our increase. And we don't think twice about that. But every association I've worked with, they stress to no end about this little increase in dues. So that's interesting.
Yes.
You talk often about aligning pricing with value. I've seen it in your newsletters. I've already heard you mention value-based pricing today. What does that actually look like in practice?
So effectively, it's honing in on what does the audience care about, and laser focusing on that, and then testing for that. What are they willing to pay? That's the simplified like thesis statement, but kind of in practice a little more, like pull it back to associations. Effectively, there's different pricing methodologies that we recommend. And so one of them is using something called max diff, which determines like a ranking of what do they value out of the membership or whatever the product. It could be event, it could be sponsorship, B2B, B2C, whatever. But kind of figuring out what do they care most about. That's typically going to also tell you what might you sunset. We supplement that with things like where else are you getting similar experiences or information and what can we learn from them? So the competitive landscape. And then from there, there's a series of pricing methodologies that you can also use around willingness to pay. So you say, okay, if we lean more into this, or if we offer this more, if we cultivate this type of experience more, how does that impact what you're willing to pay for that experience, for that product? And that's where different ones that you can use would be Van Westendorp, Gabor-Granger, conjoint analysis. Those are the three we typically play with, depending on the scenario. But through those, you can then sort of pit and test, okay, if you're enjoying, let's say, virtual peer quarterly, well, meetups, should they be quarterly? Should they be monthly? What's overkill? Because monthly might be too much. Maybe quarterly is just right. Maybe it's every other month. Maybe it's 6 a year. So figuring that and then saying, okay, and then based on how often we're offering these, how does that move the needle in what you're paying for it? And people, I think that association's twofold with this. One is I think that you've already hit on this, but I think that they're afraid to raise prices because of the nonprofit status. They have some shame around it, which is absurd. To me, pricing is not about greed. It's about financial sustainability. But then number two, they're also afraid that people won't tell them what they're willing to pay. But then when we use our own examples, like you brought up, like Netflix goes up every year. And, if they ask, we'd be able to kind of tell them. People will tell you what they want. They'll tell you how they want to engage. So we just have to be able to ask those questions.
Yeah, there's a lot to take into account there. One thing I do find interesting in your content, though, is that idea that associations make pricing too complicated. This doesn't really surprise me. Associations make a lot of things complicated. That's what we're good at. But why does simplicity and clarity matter so much when it comes to member trust and pricing acceptance?
Yeah, mostly because, again, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the customer. You want simplicity. If you think, I like to use B2C examples a lot, that, Starbucks or Netflix or whatever that we use as consumers. If I went into Starbucks and there were too many sizes, it would be confusing. If Netflix offered too many different plans with all these little nuances. So if you're going to simplify and you're going to say, okay, there's 1, 2, maybe 3 options, core options, right? Then the first thing you have to figure out, though, is what are the levers that matter? Like in my coffee, it's usually based on size first. Then there's some of the add-on, the upgrades, like what milk I'm using or, shots of flavor or whatever. But if they focus on too many things, like what color my cup was, or if it was, recyclable materials versus, not, like they have to figure out what are the things that the consumer cares about that they want to decide between. And then you have to simplify so that there's not analysis paralysis. But again, that takes like testing and figuring out what do they care about. So as we simplify and we say, okay, this type of customer is coming to us, they typically are going to care about these things. Maybe it's how much digital education they're getting in their membership, or how much do they get access, unlimited access to something versus limited. As you narrow that down a bit, it helps them to quickly scan and go, okay, that's the right plan for me. That's the right thing. And also it makes them feel seen and heard because they go, okay, this is what I care about and like the lever that's going to move me. So I think that's kind of, that's where we have to simplify. But again, almost with that caveat of, but then we have to know what are the right things to simplify, what are the right options to offer. And that goes back into assessing and testing and data collection and market research with the audience to even figure that out.
Right. Well, and when we think then about the connection between engagement and pricing power, because that's powerful. So how do strong communities, that volunteer engagement and the member experience ultimately influence what you're able to charge?
So I would say that I actually think of another thing there too, which is engagement. One thing I want to make sure that I've actually been pushing this a lot this year is there's a difference between value and engagement. So value is what do they want to even engage with? And then engagement is, are you getting them to activate, right? Like, are they utilizing it? And sometimes people think, oh, there's not enough engagement. We got to increase engagement. And my question then is, but is it even the right value? Is it the right lever? Because maybe they're not engaging because they don't care about that. Like maybe you're missing the mark. So first, make sure what are the things they care about. Then focus. That's then when marketing and the campaigns come in of, okay, now let's get you involved in this thing. So they go hand in hand. It's like yin yang, but there could be a problem on either end. But once you figure that out and you're getting them engaged in these things, so you've got the right value, you've got the right activation, marketing campaigns, all that, you're getting them to tap into the things. From there, as far as the right thing, there's a few ways you can tackle pricing. It depends on like propensity and, risk aversion and all of that. But, you could start with just some incremental increases and you kind of, that's called skim, but like you're kind of slowly going up over time with the pricing and just seeing where is the propensity. Normally, of course, antitrust, I can't, say this is what everybody should do. Like, and it varies anyway. It's kind of hard to fix the market, even if I wanted to, which I don't. But in general, I usually say, look at going up about 3 to 5% a year. And a lot of people go, well, that's a lot. When you think of compound, like our retirement accounts, right? And I know my goal is to get 8 to 10% return every year. And so it compounds and I have all the money I need by the time I retire. But costs go up every year. And if you don't keep up, it's going to be a problem. I don't think that you should go up more than, like 10 or 20% without a strong value adjustment, like you're adding something in, you're strongly changing the foundation of the product. But that's one way. Another way is by actually doing that market research. So Gabbard Granger is an easy one if you're going to dive in. With Gabbard Granger, you would effectively say, okay, let's say the current price of membership is $425 per year, $425. You would be able to pick a range in increments and test your audience of what they would be willing to pay. So let's say you pick a $200 range and the increments are $25. That means they would see any number from $425 to $625 in $25 jumps. Everybody would randomly start at a different number. So most survey platforms can set it up this way. If not, you can kind of program it. But everyone would start randomly at a different number. So some might start at $575, at $525, at $450, at $625. And then you would ask, would you be willing to pay this for this package, yes or no? And if they say yes, they keep going up till they hit the top number. If they say no, they keep going down till they say yes, or they hit the bottom number. And with that, it gives you an idea of the fall off, because what you'll typically find is as long as the front number doesn't change, people don't care as much. What gives pause is that front number. So if you're at 425, in general, what that would tell me is you could probably go all the way up to 495, 499, and no one would really bat an eye. But once you hit 525 or 500, they're like, whoa, okay, that went up. So I would do incremental jumps just in the 400s in that example. Like you're kind of safe to do that. But then knowing that when you get to 500, you better have a strong, hey, this is new and exciting, like we're adding it into membership. So there's got to be a justification, but that's where it kind of depends on where you're at, where you're trying to go. If you're just going from 425 to 475, you can kind of do that without hiring anybody. But you got to know that you can do that. If you're trying to go to 550 or 600, you probably got to look at the value, the engagement, make sure that we're ramping those up and then increasing.
Yeah. What really resonates with me with all of this is the intentionality. I mean, there's not just like here's a number. It's like really thought out and there's a process. And I like that a lot. I feel like it makes these conversations a lot easier to have. The other big thing associations are all rethinking right now is their sponsorship models. Exhibitors are not making it easy for them. They're asking harder questions. They want to know what that ROI is. They have to go back to their bosses and say why they're doing this and spending all that money. So I'm curious what you're seeing work well when organizations rethink sponsorship tiers or partner value too.
Yes. So I was actually just at a really good conference last week, and one of the panels was sponsors on a panel speaking to what they're looking for. How do they define ROI? What are they looking for when they partner? And none of them were association serving sponsors. They were like real industry, like construction companies and all that. So it was really great to hear, because it's what I hear in my own research, but in this public setting, it was beautiful. And what I always hear consistently is, number one, if they know they're not going to get an ROI for a year or two, they're okay with that as long as you communicate that. Like, hey, you're going to be the new kid on the block. It doesn't matter if you're coming in as platinum or if you're coming in as some bronze, low level copper. It's going to take time to build relationships, to build trust, for people to get to know your brand further if they're not already familiar. But number two, when it comes to ROI, I think that we think they want more than what they do. I do think they're looking for some type of metric or analytics, but they're not looking for every little thing. And they're not expecting us to directly tie their booth or their partnership to a sale. They are expecting to tie it into leads, because from there, it's not up to us, right? Once they get the lead, they have their own sales mechanism of retargeting ads. Like if they're smart, they're taking the email list and they're doing lookalike audiences and they're running LinkedIn ads or Facebook ads or whatever, depending on what they do, right? They're doing email marketing. They're doing all these things, their own follow-ups. We can't control that. What they do want to know, they want honesty and transparency when it comes to what does foot traffic look like? Or what's the best way to engage? What are things other booths have done that work and don't work? And can we do these things? So I think they are looking for a little bit more of a, when we say ROI, I think that since COVID and us going digital and having more of that footprint of here's how many people clicked on this thing, right? Versus old school shaking hands at a booth. I think there is a little bit more of, okay, how many people were at the event and how many downloaded the thing or whatever. There is a little more of that reporting, but they're not expecting it to be, oh, and because of that, within 6 months, we made another, $500,000. So it was worth spending 20,000 with you. I think they're looking, and also the other thing that I heard that was interesting was it's specific to that panel was they said, we're looking for partnership both ways. Like you guys expect us to partner with you through the good and the bad when your association's having a hard time or whatever. But also if we are, just because someone else comes along and offers 10,000 more, don't abandon us because then we're not going to be loyal to you. And I was like, whoa, that was something I've never heard someone say.
I have never thought about that either. That's so smart. And it makes sense.
Right. But it makes sense. It's like, if we're partnering, if we're really saying that, we want other things though that I always hear and were reiterated, but I always hear things like exclusivity, they care a lot about, or, certain highlight, like no one cares about badges. No one cares about, like their logo on a website or print material or any of that crap. Those are the things we do because we're like supposed to, but they don't care. They care about exclusivity. They care about being, aligned on exposure. They also, one other thing that I'm finding is more and more businesses are caring more about values-based alignment. And by that, I don't mean value-based pricing. I mean their actual corporate values. So if they care, let's say, heavily about education, right, or women in the fields, or whatever and a lot of times this will vary because it's human to human. Even if it's B2B sales, it's about the human. So sometimes it's about what the decision maker cares about personally as well, right? They might say, hey, I care a lot about this. So yes, we want a booth, but also we want to underwrite this initiative. So going to your partners with what's our strategic plan? What do we care about? What are our values? And saying these are things we want to get off the ground. Do any of these resonate? That's also going to create a much stronger partnership than just a booth. Because then it's like, no, we care about this initiative and driving this forward for the industry. And they're more likely to stay around for years just for that program.
Yeah, there were so many good nuggets in there. I think that's so valuable for associations to think about. And it is harder now to get sponsorship. So you have to be smart and strategic for sure. One thing we've touched on a little bit here is these pricing conversations, they can feel emotional internally, especially for mission-driven organizations. You mentioned that earlier, they feel the guilt. And so there's the worry, whether it's accessibility, equity, or even just member backlash. How are you helping organizations navigate those tensions?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is within, and it's not the reality externally, right? So it's like bungee jumping or jumping out the plane. It's like you worry about all the things and then you do it and you're like, well, that was cool or it wasn't that bad, right? So I think that also this is where again I like to use B2C examples a lot. Think about our for-profit counterparts like Netflix or Hulu or Disney. They email me just like a quick, hey, the price is going to this effective this date and that's it. There is no big long justification. It's not an apology. It's not like, I'm so sorry that we have to raise your price. And for them, it's not to do more good work per se. It's just they're a for-profit and they need to make money. Where for us, I think we have the option though to tie it back into good. We can say, okay, we've heard from our membership that they want more of this thing. And so we're rolling this out and therefore, we're moving the price to here, but now people are going to get this thing. And that helps a bit. But I usually say keep it punchy, like 1-2 paragraphs tops. And paragraph I use loosely. By that, I mean like 1 to 3 sentences per, because digital paragraphs are very different from written back in, when we were in high school and we had to write everything by hand and do 5 sentences and that. I feel like it's got to be quick, punchy. And also the other thing that I say is if it's not something that someone is annually having a recurring bill on, you don't really even need to announce it like that. Like event price, why would you say, oh, we've gone up? You just do it. Like people, it's not on auto pay. So you don't owe anyone but something like a membership, or if it's like an education pass subscription, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm paying $100 a year to get access to the LMS or something. Things like that are kind of a renewal, I would give a heads up. Outside of that, if it's a one-time, like webinar cost is going up or whatever, you don't even announce that. You just do it, and that's it. I honestly think we overthink it so much, and it's to our own detriment. I think that a lot of us come from industry and then we all fall into associations. It's usually from industry, or we got some random job that led to. I think that if more of us had like a corporate background, it would be much easier. I think it's something in our experiences that we coddle ourselves a bit too much, but like they're not all gonna quit. You're not gonna have some mass exodus. Like now, again, if you go from 425 to 625, yeah, like that, you're shooting yourself in the foot there. But if you're going from 425 to 450, which is a good, healthy, about 5% increase, you're not going to lose that many members. And here's the other thing, profitability goes way up. If you think, let's use that 425 as a quick example. Most associations, if you just look at your 990 and figure out your overall organization profitability, because most don't know their individual products profitability. It's not tracked well. Let's say that your overall is like 10%, right? That you're making about 10% profit. So maybe you make $1 million as an org a year, 900,000 expenses, 100,000 profit, and then scale that to however many millions your org makes. And 10% is generous. I'm finding more like 5 to 10%. Some are losing money every year. So let's say 10%. That means on that 425, you're making about $40. The rest is costs. If you didn't really add anything in that was material that costed more, but you went from 425 to 450, that means that your profit has just gone from about $40 to about $60. You've just increased your profit by 50% by raising the price 5%. And even if you lost members, unless you lose more than 50% of your members, you're going to make more money by raising your price. And chances are you're probably not going to have more than 1% that leave because of the price increase. Like they're going to go, okay, even if begrudgingly a little bit. Everyone's begrudging the price increases. I'm never like, yay, my car insurance just went up for the next 6-month premium. It's like, damn, like I'm paying another $600 every 6 months now. That sucks, but I pay it. So all that being said, I think there's a pricing. That's where I meant earlier, like it's the quickest lever to increase profitability, not, oh, we need to increase membership by 10%. It's like, no, if you increase price by 3%, you're probably gonna have the same bottom line impact and no one's gonna flinch an eye. And you didn't have to do this big marketing campaign that took a year to try to get results. So do both, but like pricing really matters. Keep the momentum going. If you're scared, just do little increases every year and it'll be okay, I promise.
I feel so much of this so deeply. I worked in-house at associations the first 15 years of my career before coming over to the agency side. And I've had this conversation so many times. I can't even tell you. And the funny thing is, so on the comm side of things, I've helped a lot of associations put together that messaging around it. And we've stressed so much about just the right thing. And 99% of the time, I tell the next person, you know what? No one said a thing. No one cares. They just paid it and signed back up. So you're so right.
Yeah. And it's usually what it usually is it's usually like a task force, a committee, or the board. It's volunteers who maybe we're asking them to give insight into this price increase, which I never agree with personally. I think it needs to be staff driven and then only board approved if it's something that the board has to approve. But because the staff is commissioned with running the organization, right? The board is there for fiscal accountability and vision and all that. But the business of the association is for the staff, truly. With that, though, I feel like usually it's the volunteers in whatever capacity, board, task force, committee, that are like, oh, for us, this would be such an increase. And it's like, I hear you and you matter, but you're one member of thousands. And everyone may not feel that way. It's just like our events when the few people that complained that the room was hot or the food sucked, but it's like, okay, we have 5,000 people here and 100 said the food sucked, and that is valid, but it is literally 0.2%, right? Or 1%, 2%, whatever it's this much.
It's so small.
And they're not going to not come back. They're going to come back. They're just going to joke and say, I hope the food's better this year.
Right.
So don't always, it's a squeaky wheel. Don't always let them get that much power. Like, it's a business. You have to run it as such. You have to have money or you're not going to be able to. And here's the thing. If we don't, with the rise of AI, for-profit companies, all these that are doing what we do now, who's going to, by being the nonprofit, we are the gatekeeper. We are the gold standard for the industry. So it is our responsibility to have money and keep operating alongside these others. Otherwise, there's going to be other vested interests that sway policy, advocacy, the direction of the profession. That's not what we want. We want this safe space of a nonprofit with a board of, members that are kind of, that are guiding the profession. So we need money to do that.
Yeah. So let's build on that, because a couple of things you said there, they're really hit. And I think you often emphasize that pricing is really about financial stability. So when you're saying like using it as a profitability level, but it's not about greed. So why does that distinction matter so much for association leaders to communicate both internally and externally?
Okay, that's basically my version of holding their hand and saying it's going to be okay. That's what I learned, and I say that lovingly. But
I love it.
I think I first came up with that like statement of price isn't about greed, it's about financial sustainability back in like 2020. Like it was during like COVID really happening, because up until that point, again, people were worried but there was just that for me was such a pivotal moment of listen. You're literally using your reserves up. And we don't know, at that point, we don't know how long this is. We were told 2 weeks, then it turns into months, year. Like we didn't know what was going on. And all of us had the majority of our finances vested in the annual event, between event registration, mostly the sponsorships being tied to annual event. And without being able to do a annual event the way that we were used to, that really hit the bottom line of almost every association. I don't know any that thrived during COVID. I think it was a survival mode. And that's not to say there were some that did well in certain ways because they had already set up digital education and all that, but it wasn't great. All that being said, for me at that point, there were so many that were giving away virtual events for free. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Because if you're normally charging $1,500 to come, I get it's not the same experience as far as they're not getting food and beverage, and the networking you can't really replicate. But the education is there. That's 80% of it. What I said as rule of thumb was, I don't think you should be charging less than 50 to 80% of your normal in-person rate for a virtual event. Now, if your profession was hit, like let's say it's nurses who are working their butts off, or it is, like meeting professionals who aren't making their money like that, right? Then yes, you might give away for free because they're impacted. But there were certain industries like tech and that I'm like, they're not impacted. They can work remote. They're still getting their paycheck. The company's making profit, the mask companies, all that. They're doing just fine. You don't need to give them anything for free right now. And so that's when it was kind of like a let me hold your hand while I say this, but like, it's not about greed, because that's what people thought. I think it was back in the association chat era on Facebook. I think it was in that group that I made a post or I commented or something, and someone said, I think it was something like, why aren't we talking about price? Like I was genuinely asking as like a feeler. And someone said, I think it was that someone replied and said, it makes it feel like greed. And that's when I was like, wait, no, pricing is not about greed. It is about financial sustainability. Like we got to make money. You want your salary, right? Like as staff, you want to hire more people. You want to implement more technology, right? Like we want to do our work really well. You got to have money. So where is it coming from? If you're afraid to charge, where is it going to come from?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, crystal ball time. What shifts do you think associations need to prepare for when it comes to those member expectations, pricing models, and really just communicating value over the next few years?
Honestly, this is probably my own bias hot take, but I think that we need to be ready to blow up some models. I think that us trying to charge for membership that really lacks any value. I think what most, especially society, like individual associations, what I see a lot is that their membership has really no value, but they are charging a premium for it. And then they're trying to non-dues their way to everything else. And it's not sustainable. Like people are not going to keep spending $400 a year when the membership's barely giving, it's like an entry ticket. So I think that's going to blow up. I think that especially with the competition of information, of AI, of for-profit don't need to make money. an education for them. It's a lead gen thing. So we have to look at their business model and understand that. So with webinars and everything, all this information being everywhere for free, I think that we're going to have to anchor more that membership is about a collective peer group where we're meeting, we're engaging, we're sharing ideas, and also we're getting that education all within membership. And then maybe going to the event is the extra thing, or doing a special or a symposium. I think we're going to have to blow that up a little bit. And I think we're going to have to really assess, are we delivering value for the price? Because I think that a lot of memberships are going to be overpriced, undervalued, or lacking value in the coming years. So that's one thing I think we're going to have to watch for. I'm not as worried about sponsorship. I think it's just more of like a shift in how we report. But I think membership, like the member side, I think we're going to have a bit of a rude awakening in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I hear you. Michael, this has been so fantastic. And I so appreciate you taking the time to share all these great insights with our listeners. Before we let you go, though, we like to wrap up all of our episodes with some just for fun, rapid fire style questions so our audience can get to know you a little bit. So
yeah.
First one is, what's one small thing that brings you joy lately?
Rest with family, like just cuddling up on the couch, watching, like just rest.
I have a 5-year-old, so that's still we're not at the rest stage.
Okay, my youngest is turning 5. So I feel that I make him, the older ones get it. Yeah, I feel you.
Awesome. Okay, well, what are you currently obsessed with? Be it a book, show, hobby, or idea? What's the latest obsession?
I'm really actually studying fashion houses right now, like Chanel, Louis Vuitton. Like I'm getting more into the history, the designers, the history of it all, and how they've all interacted. So I don't know what, just my autism, it piqued my interest, and now I'm on a rabbit hole. So that's my obsession this month.
I love that. Okay, what's your ideal comfort food?
My pasta. I make really good spaghetti, and that's my favorite. Yep.
Love that. Love that. Okay, last one. What's a travel moment that still makes you smile when you think about it?
Oh, I got to spend last summer about 5 weeks in Mexico City with my kids, and we just took a long, trip. That was just just the length of time, enjoying, moving slowly. For the memory for forever. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you again. This was so much fun. I loved having you on, and hopefully we'll get to talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Colleen. I appreciate it.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. The Association Insights podcast, powered by OnWrd and UpWrd, is a production of OnWrd and UpWrd Marketing and Communications, where our mission is to make associations and nonprofits the go-to source in their industries through earned media and thought leadership. This podcast is an extension of our newsletter, a weekly collection of best practices, top trends, helpful ideas, and smart strategies delivered straight to your inbox. Have you undertaken a big change at your association? Or do you have some words of wisdom from the trenches of association life? Well, we want to hear from you, and so do our listeners. Drop us a note at info@onwardupwrd.com. That's info@onwrdupwrd.com. Be sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and share with your friends and colleagues. We're available anywhere podcasts are found. Come back next week for more association inspiration and insights. Thanks for tuning in.